What connects a CEO in a Manhattan glass tower, a hacker operating in the shadows of a digital darkroom, and a four-star general in the Pentagon? On the surface, nothing. But look closer and you will see they are all reading from the same playbook. It is a manual written 2,500 years ago, before the invention of paper, before gunpowder, and before the first map of the world was ever drawn. Yet today this ancient bamboo scroll is required reading for the U.S. Marine Corps, the sharks of Wall Street, and the political elite of the Communist Party of China. Why? Because the nature of war has changed, but the nature of power has not. We are living through an invisible war. It isn't just being fought with missiles anymore, it is being fought with supply chains, currency manipulation, and social media algorithms. The ancient master who wrote these words warned us that the greatest victory requires no battle at all. This is the story of the art of war. And if you don't know the rules of this book, you aren't just losing the game, you don't even know you're playing it. To understand the book, you must first smell the smoke of the era that birthed it. We go back to 5th century BC China, the Warring States period. This wasn't a time of honor, it was a time of total anarchy. 7 great states were tearing the civilization apart. Alliances were written in ink and broken in blood. In this world, losing a war didn't mean paying taxes to a new king. It meant the extermination of your clan, the burning of your city, and the erasure of your history. Into this meat grinder stepped a mysterious strategist named Sun Tzu. Legend tells us he arrived at the court of King Helu of Wu, claiming he could turn any group of people into a disciplined army. The king, amused, decided to test him. He didn't give Sun Tzu soldiers. He gave him 180 of his favorite concubines, women of the court dressed in silk who had never held a weapon in their lives. Sun Tzu lined them up. He explained the drills. But when the drums beat for the first command, the women just giggled. They thought it was a game. Sun Tzu repeated the order. Again they laughed. The king watched from his balcony, entertained. But Sun Tzu wasn't smiling. He turned to the king's guards and said, "If words of command are not clear, the general is to blame. But if his orders are clear and the soldiers nevertheless disobey, then it is the fault of their officers." In a move that froze the blood of everyone present, Sun Tzu ordered the execution of the king's 2 favorite concubines, the leaders of the groups. The king screamed for mercy. Sun Tzu ignored him, stating that on the battlefield the general's authority supersedes the king's. The swords fell. The laughter stopped. When the drums beat again, the remaining women drilled with the precision of hardened veterans. In silence. In terror. This is the first lesson of the art of war. Strategy is useless without discipline. And in the face of extinction, there is no room for mercy. He established discipline through blood, but he won wars through the mind. And this is where the West often misunderstands the East. If you go to a Western military academy, you study Karl von Clausewitz, the Prussian general who defined war as an act of force to compel our enemy to do our will. It is a clash of titans. It is chess. You strike the center, you sacrifice pawns, and you kill the king. It is direct, linear, and violent. Sun Tzu rejects this entirely. For him, fighting is the lowest form of strategy. He wrote, "The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting." If Western war is chess, Sun Tzu's war is the ancient game of Go. In Go, you don't attack the enemy pieces directly, you place your stones on the empty parts of the board. You surround the territory. You cut off their escape. By the time the enemy realizes they are trapped, the game is already over. They haven't been defeated in battle, they have been suffocated by strategy. At the heart of this doctrine is one terrifying sentence: all warfare is based on deception. Sun Tzu teaches that truth is a liability. When able, feign inability. When active, appear inactive. When near, make the enemy believe you are far away. He tells us to become like water. A soldier marching in formation is like a stone, rigid and predictable. But water has no shape. It avoids the high ground, the enemy's strength, and rushes to the lowlands, the enemy's weakness. It adapts to the shape of the container. In Sun Tzu's world, the strongest army isn't the one with the most swords. It's the one you never saw coming until it was too late. Fast forward 2,000 years. The ink on the bamboo slips is dry, but the lesson is about to be taught again, this time to a superpower. The Vietnam War remains the ultimate case study of Sun Tzu in the modern era. It was David versus Goliath. The United States possessed the greatest firepower in human history. They had air superiority, infinite supply lines, and the atomic bomb. The North Vietnamese had rice, patience, and the art of war. Ho Chi Minh and his top general Vong Nguyen Giap were not just soldiers, they were devoted scholars of Sun Tzu. They knew they could not defeat the Americans in a direct contest of strength. That would be suicide. So, while American generals played chess, looking to capture cities and kill the king, General Giap played Go. The U.S. strategy was built on statistics, body counts, bombing tonnage, and holding territory. They sought a decisive battle. But Giap refused to give them one. He followed Sun Tzu's dictum: if the enemy is strong, avoid him. If he is angry, irritate him. The Viet Cong became water. When the Americans advanced, they vanished into the jungle or underground tunnels. When the Americans slept, they struck from the shadows. They turned the American strength, their massive size, into a weakness, bleeding them dry in a war of attrition where technology was useless against an enemy you couldn't find. But the masterstroke was psychological. Sun Tzu taught that the target is the mind of the opposing commander. Giap expanded this. The target was the mind of the American public. The Tet Offensive of 1968 was a military disaster for the North. They lost tens of thousands of men. But strategically, it was a death blow to the U.S. It proved to voters back in Ohio and New York that the war was unwinnable. The United States won almost every major battle in Vietnam, yet they lost the war. Why? Because they were fighting over hills and valleys, while the disciples of Sun Tzu were fighting for the will to continue. The mud of Vietnam dried up, but the war didn't end. It just moved. In the 1980s, the art of war was suddenly found on the desks of every major CEO from Tokyo to New York. The term war was rebranded as competition, but the intent remained the same: total dominance. Nowhere is this clearer than in the rise of Silicon Valley. Consider the war between Netflix and Blockbuster. In the early 2000s, Blockbuster was the fortress. They had thousands of stores, massive revenue, and total market control. A direct attack, trying to build more video stores than them, would have been suicide. That is the Western way, force against force. Reed Hastings, the founder of Netflix, took the Eastern path. He followed Sun Tzu's rule: avoid what is strong and strike at what is weak. He didn't attack Blockbuster's strength, their physical locations. He attacked their weakness: the customer's hatred of late fees and the inconvenience of driving to the store. Netflix flowed like water, bypassing the physical world entirely to deliver DVDs by mail and later, streaming. Blockbuster, arrogant and rigid, ignored the small competitor, believing their size made them invincible. They failed to realize they were being surrounded. By the time they tried to adapt, the territory of the customer's mind had already been conquered. Today, corporate culture has fully internalized this ruthlessness. Killing the competition isn't a metaphor in the boardroom. It is doctrine. The modern CEO is simply a warlord in a suit. But while Western CEOs were using Sun Tzu to sell movie subscriptions back in Beijing, the book was being used for its original purpose: empire. The modern geopolitical strategy of the Chinese Communist Party is almost a direct transcription of the art of war. To understand the tension between the US and China today, you have to understand the difference in their perception of time. In the West, we live in 4-year cycles. Presidents worry about the next election. CEOs worry about the next quarterly report. China does not. They are running what geopolitical experts call the 100-year marathon. While Washington argues over the next budget, Beijing is executing 50-year plans. Sun Tzu taught that he who is prudent and lies in wait for an enemy who is not, will be victorious. China has been waiting. In 1999, 2 senior colonels in the Chinese People's Liberation Army published a book called Unrestricted Warfare. It is essentially a modern update of Sun Tzu. They argued that in the future, warfare will not be about soldiers shooting soldiers. It will be about trade wars. It will be lawfare, using international laws to paralyze the enemy. It will be debt-trap diplomacy, where you don't conquer a country with tanks. You conquer it by lending them billions to build a port, and when they can't pay you back, you take the port. Look at the Belt and Road Initiative. It isn't just infrastructure. It is a game of Go played on a planetary scale. China is placing stones in Pakistan and Sri Lanka and Africa, slowly surrounding the global economy. Sun Tzu also had a specific stratagem for dealing with a chaotic enemy: loot a burning house. When the West stumbles, whether it's the 2008 financial crash or the political polarization tearing America apart today, China sees an opportunity. They don't need to attack the house. They just need to wait for us to set fire to it ourselves, and then quietly move in to pick through the ashes. But the most terrifying application of Sun Tzu isn't happening in the South China Sea. It is happening right now on the screen in front of you. Warfare has moved into the 5th domain, cyberspace. In ancient times, the terrain was mountains and rivers. Today, the terrain is the internet. And Sun Tzu devoted an entire chapter, chapter 13, to the most vital element of war, spies. He wrote, "Foreknowledge cannot be gotten from ghosts and spirits. It must be obtained from men who know the enemy situation." Today, spies don't always wear trench coats. They are algorithms. They are apps on your phone. Modern cyber warfare is the ultimate expression of Sun Tzu's philosophy. Why invade a country when you can siphon its intellectual property, harvest the data of its citizens, and subtly influence its public opinion without ever firing a shot? Whether it is the debate over TikTok, state-sponsored hackers shutting down power grids, or bot farms sowing discord during elections, the goal is the same: to confuse, divide, and demoralize. Sun Tzu warned us, "The whole secret lies in confusing the enemy, so that he cannot fathom our real intent." We are currently living through the greatest information war in history. And the scary part? You aren't just watching it. You are the target. The bamboo slips have turned to dust, but the mind behind them is more alive than ever. We are living in the world Sun Tzu predicted, a place where the most dangerous weapon isn't a nuclear missile but a strategy. The sword may be sheathed, but the war continues in the shadows. To understand how the West is finally waking up to counter this ancient playbook, click here to watch the story of the island strategy.